They say the fire started in the chapel's rafters, but others, quiet folk, who don't speak unless the snow is falling, they'll tell you it started in the throat of a sleeping woman. Prudence Dunmore, wife to Elias, mother of 3, a quiet soul known for her bread and her stillness, until the dreams. The first one came in winter. She woke with her fingers blackened from cold, though the hearth was burning. Said she'd been kneeling in snow before an altar of roots, and someone had spoken to her. Now the town chalked it up to stress, a woman's mind tired from childbirth and cold. But Prudence didn't just dream again. She changed. She stopped going to the village chapel. She baked with herbs no one recognized. She started humming soft little songs that made dogs whine and babies fall silent. And then she spoke of him, Saint Berain, a name no one knew. Not Elias, not the pastor, not the books in the chapel's study. But she said he spoke to her from below, that his words were warm as breath, and that he showed her the mouth. Elias begged the preacher to intervene, said his wife had taken to walking in the woods barefoot in the frost, that she prayed in a language that sounded more like breathing than speech. And so the preacher came. He brought a cross and oil and 3 hymns memorized. Prudence opened the door. She smiled, asked if he'd ever felt the earth breathe. He didn't enter. He turned and walked away. That Sunday, he gave a sermon about false saints, about Eve, about temptation. Prudence baked 3 loaves that afternoon. One was left on the chapel steps. By morning, the preacher had left town. They say the dream spread after that, to a boy named Jonah, to a midwife's apprentice, to a deaf man who started humming. Not many, but enough. Prudence began gathering them quietly. They didn't call themselves anything. No church, no robes, tithes. Just a room in the Dunmore house, a bowl of water, a root, and a candle. And her voice, soft, careful, measured like breath. She spoke what Berain told her. Not sermons, not law, reminders. That the soil remembers, that the mouth does not close, that sacrifice is just another kind of planting. One girl, they said, left after the first gathering, said Prudence's voice echoed twice in her ears, once in sound and once inside her skull. She said she dreamed of a seed with teeth. She hanged herself the next night in her family's barn. They say her eyes were still moving when they cut her down. The gatherings grew smaller after that, but stronger, more focused, more reverent. Prudence stopped speaking in town altogether, except once. She asked the blacksmith to make a small metal disc carved with a spiral. She buried it behind her house, under the roots of a pine that never lost its color. And then she simply vanished into the forest. No one knows why or what the disc was for. A man named Fletcher Cobb claimed he saw Prudence in the woods weeks after she vanished. He said she was barefoot in the snow, wearing a shawl made of woven vines. Said she held a candle that didn't burn, and when she turned to him, her eyes were gone, but she saw him. He said she was whispering something, but the words weren't for him. They were for the ground. And when he looked down, the snow beneath her feet was melting. And he left town that same night. Now, there were others who claimed to see her in dreams, in reflections, in the patterns of tree bark, in the folds of wet cloth, always with that same whisper trailing behind her. Not words, not breath, just the feeling of being remembered by something beneath. One boy tried to carve her name into a tree. The tree bled sap that burned his skin. Another girl followed the sound of humming into the woods. She returned 3 days later, mute, but she could sing every note of Prudence's lullaby perfectly. She sings it still. The night the chapel burned, no one saw flames. They just woke to ash falling from the sky. The roof was gone, the walls blackened, but the altar, the real one, not the one inside, was untouched. The mouth, a circle of stone behind the Dunmore home, just a few feet wide. Soil there never froze, never cracked. It was warm to the touch. They say Prudence knelt there one last time, sang a song that sounded like weeping, and laid her hands on the stones. And when she stood, the soil sighed. She walked into the woods alone, never to be seen again. She is still heard by the faithful, by the dreaming, by the ones who feel breath in the frost. Some say she speaks in wind now. Some say she is the wind. All agree on one thing. She was the first to call it holy, and the last to call it by name. Weeks after Prudence had vanished, Elias found a letter in her handwriting hidden beneath the hearthstone. If the mouth opens again, feed it nothing you wish to see return. They say the page bled through with some dark rust-colored stain. The soil behind the Dunmore house began to shift. Things simply stopped growing there. Birds wouldn't land in the trees anymore. Then came the winter, where the river froze but the ground stayed warm, where roots moved like worms in the snow, and where the field beyond the Dunmore house turned black and soft. A new family tried to plant there. The crop grew too quickly, taller than it should. Blossoms opened up overnight, but when they tore one flower open, it was full of teeth. Next time, we'll speak of the harvest, of how good fortune always comes at a cost, and how blood can be used to make things grow.